verse 8. Every time I read this verse, I cannot read Daniel 1, verse 8, but what it don't take me back to when I was 14 and 15 and 16. I've read this verse probably 1,000 or more times. He purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with the portion of the king's meat. There is the portion of the devil's meat that a lot of Christians are defiling themselves with. But you've got to make up your mind, I'm not going that way. There are some ways I have purposed in my heart, I'm not going. There are some lines I've drawn in the sand that I've purposed in my heart I would not cross as a teenager. By God's grace, all these years later, I'm coming up in May of next year, it'll be 20 years. 2 decades that God showed me what His will for my life was. I knew as a 9-year-old boy, if I had no doubt when I was 9. I knew. I was scared to death, didn't surrender until I was 14, but I knew as a 9-year-old boy that I was born to preach the gospel. And I'm telling you something, young people, if you will purpose in your heart young, early on, that you will serve God, you can keep some commitments and convictions that will carry you all the days of your life. There are things I purposed in my heart that God and I know about. They're between me and the Lord. That I purposed in my heart as just a teenage boy, that to God be all the glory, that I've still not crossed those lines. Nor with the wine which he drank, verse number 8, therefore he requested of the prince, the eunuchs, that he might not defile himself. Now God, and I love this, now preachers, I want you to listen to this, and not just the preachers in the church. I want all of us as God's people to understand verse number 9. This is how powerful our God is. This is why you should not jockey for a position, whether it's on the job site, at your workplace. That's why you don't have to step all over other people to get rank or position or influence. You don't have to do that. If you are saved and in the will of God, God does that for you. You don't have to cheat your way to some position. You don't have to walk all over other people. You don't have to slander other people to get to where you want to go. Let God do the promoting and God will do it. Because verse 9, now God had brought Daniel into favor. I want us to read that together, church. You follow me with the Bible. Let's start right now. 1, 2, 3. Now God had brought Daniel into favor. On the count of 3, say favor with me. 1, 2, 3, favor. God brought Daniel into what? Favor. God brought him into this. He didn't have to force his way into it. He didn't have to open up the doors and say, here I am. He let God do that. God promoted Daniel. God brought him into favor. And tender love. That word tender, in your Bible, it means literally sympathetic. He brought him into a sympathetic love. God gave him such favor with this man, the prince of the eunuchs, that God is going to put Daniel in the right place at the right time, put the right people in his life at the right time, the right place, and God's going to bring all this together. And the prince of the eunuchs said to Daniel, I fear my lord the king, which hath appointed your meat and your drink. Why should he see your faces worse liking than the children which are of your sort? Then shall you make me endanger my own head to the king. What the eunuch, the prince of the eunuchs, is saying is this. He's like, if you take something less than what I'm giving all the other men, if you take what you're wanting, pulse or vegetables is what this is. Daniel says, I want vegetables. I'm looking for vegetables. I'm not looking to eat meat or things that are defiled. Things that our God back in Israel forbids us from taking. These are some oaths, some standards, some convictions we've got we're not willing to part on. And the eunuch said, listen, this makes no sense. It's better to eat your meat than to eat vegetables. You're going to do a lot better, be a lot healthier, and a lot stronger eating steak than your tomato. That's a fruit, right? I guess. Your corn on the cob, whatever it is, right? You ought to eat meat. Meat strengthens you, not just vegetables. You don't need to be a vegetarian. But Daniel's saying, listen, our God in His law tells us under the dietary restrictions of that day that here's what you're supposed to eat, here's what you don't eat. And the eunuch said, listen, this does not even make sense. The prince told him, said, listen, you're going to fare worse than the rest of them. You're going to look poor. You're going to look sickly. And when you stand before the king, and he sees all these other boys your age, strong and muscled up and ready to serve. And he looks at you, 4 men, Daniel and his 3 compadres. and he says that he sees those men looking sick and ill, he's going to kill me. I'm the one in danger. And Daniel said no, said, give us 10 days. Give us 10 days to test. This is a 10-day test. And at the end of 10 days, you see if we look any sicker or worse off than we did at the first of this. Now, that's a lot of groundwork to lay for this simple closing statement. I'm about to wrap up and we're going to go to the house. So I want you to listen fast because I'm wrapping up. I mean, we took off. It's like flying from Asheville to Atlanta. You know, you get up in the air and the next thing you know, you're descending ready to land. It's a very quick flight. This has been a very quick flight. This morning, Daniel purposed in his heart, listen, there are some things that God has told me not to do in His Word. God has drawn some lines in the sand for me to abide by. And no matter where I'm at, if I'm at home or if I'm in a foreign country, I'm not crossing those lines. He purposed in his heart. So here's what it comes down to. You're going to have to live on purpose for God. You have got to live on purpose for God. You will never live for God, not in America, not in Babylon. You'll never live for God anywhere in this world unless you do it on purpose. You'll never do it on accident. You'll never haphazardly serve God and be in a place with God that you want to be. Those places you say, man, I want to have such an intimate fellowship with God. I want to fellowship with God. Beckham, yesterday we spent Daddy and Sunday together, and as Catherine went to the women's conference, and I wasn't quite brave enough to do what my wife does every day and watch both kids, so I just took Beckham and she took Benjamin, and we're running around, and I told him when he got up, you know, I said, listen, we'll go find candy. And so sure enough, we went and got candy, and we made just a day of it, got him a cookout cheeseburger, and just had the best of time. We're coming back through Roan Mountain, and I'm talking, and Beckham's like, Daddy, what are you doing? And Brother Luke, it hit me. Because as I was answering Beckham, I thought of the privilege it was and how real this is. I said, Beckham, Daddy's talking to Jesus right now. You can have that intimate fellowship where God is a living, bright reality in your life and not some abstract deity in a faraway universe somewhere. But He is right here with you. You may not be able to understand this or comprehend this, but listen to me. You cannot deny what I'm telling you is true because it's my experience. Every day of my life, God is a living, bright reality, and He wants to be that way for you. And there are people that you look at in your life and you say, man, I want to have the prayer life that they've got. I want to have the walk with God that they have. I want to have the Bible knowledge that they have. They're a walking biblical encyclopedia. I want to be like that. You can be like that. I want you to know that every one of you in this room can have a walk with God, but you're going to have to do it on purpose. You're going to have to purpose in your heart, I want more than just the average Christian life. You're going to have to purpose in your life, I want more than just to go to church and float through life on some cloud of ease, but I'm willing to pay the price. I'm willing to go all in for God. I'm willing to read my Bible when it's not convenient. I'm willing to pray when I don't feel like it. I'm willing to be faithful to the house of God when I could do a lot of other things. I'm willing to purpose in my heart that I'll serve Him. They tried to erase all of these things. I told you in the introduction, I've completely bypassed my introduction. We'll leave that for another time. Maybe God will build a message around it for some other time. I close with saying this. You need. And I choose my words carefully. I understand the weight of what I'm telling you, but you need, whether you realize it's a need or not, you need the purpose in your heart you'll serve God. You need God in your life. You need the Holy Father leading you and giving you direction in life. You need discernment. You need direction. You need guidance from another world. You need God more than you need anything or anybody else. You can get a lot of things right, but if you get God wrong, you missed it all. Life implodes. It falls apart without Him. Life is worth the living, as the song says, because He lives. And we can trust Him. But you're going to have to purpose in your heart that I'm going to serve God. I close with this. You know, it's hard living a Christian life. Very difficult, and it was for Daniel. I love reading the Bible because no matter what you go through, you find something to help you. Like I've been asking for the last week, how do I carry myself in times of political turbulence? What is the correct Christian response in times of political upheaval, of unrest? The Bible is filled with stories of people who served God in more tumultuous times politically than what we're in right now even. And you can study it. What did Daniel do? What did Esther do? What did David do? This Bible covers over 4,000 years of human history in which time empires rose and they collapsed. And the Bible has everything you need to live. Do you think it's harder for you to live for Jesus right now than it was for Daniel back then? No. Here's what I have people say. They'll say this sometimes. Well, it's different, right? Maybe it's easier, maybe it's harder. Listen to me. God don't have favorite children. He has faithful children. Any child of God, any Christian who has any rank with God, any intimacy with the Lord, anything where they have a walk with God that's abnormal and supernatural even, those are people that God didn't just say, hey, I'm going to randomly take a wand out of heaven and, hold it over you and say, I'm going to choose you to have all this and nobody else. Everybody who has anything with God got there on a journey. God led them down a road, and the people where they are now, they walked there. They didn't get carried there. God's with us. God's faithful. God helps us through. But you've got to put one foot in front of the other. And it's a day-by-day thing. That's why we don't talk about the run with God. It's a walk with God. Every day of your life, you get up and you do the same thing over and over. And you say, but it's hard. I know it's hard. I know it is. But if you'll purpose in your heart, you'll serve God. He'll help you and give you the grace and everything you need. I don't know why I feel so impressed of God to share this. I honestly have not. I've told this, it's been several years since I told it, probably 3 or 4 maybe. But I, honest to God, feel like this for somebody. And I want to prove a point, because we're not just talking about what the Bible says about serving God and how God will help you, and God will, if you'll purpose in your heart, God will help you and God will give you grace. Yes, that's true. But I want to tell you something, what God helped me with several years ago. It's one of the craziest stories. And I hesitate because it's all of God, and it's humorous, but it's real life. It almost sounds fake. But as a young boy, as a teenager, when God called me at 14 to preach, my first job was working in Fosco for Brother Ronnie. After that, I stepped out and started a lawn care business. And God provided the lawnmower. I had to buy new tires, had dry rotted tires, and I had to buy a new battery. But, it was an old, dirty mower, cleaned up real good, and I was proud of it. And my first job was right down the road, on the road that I grew up living on, Frank Wilson Road. And I was able to, mow Miss Connie's yard. That was my first one, making $60 every time I mowed the yard. And I thought, man, this is great. Slowly but surely, God started bringing yards in. God grew the business. We called it Go Greene Lawn Care, Go Greene with E on the end, and see how much green you could save when you go green. And so we had the slogans and the stickers to go on the doors, and had the green truck and all that to go with it. I mean, just loving it, right? And I remember meeting a woman in Mountain City, Tennessee, and her husband was retired from NASA. And he was deceased. She was still living, obviously, and she needed someone to come mow her yard. She told me, first time I ever talked to this woman, she's probably in her 80s, and she said, the last, and she used some choice words, the last blanketed blank preacher that mower I had was a preacher. I'll never hire another preacher to mow my yard. I didn't tell her until after I got the job, and a few mows later that I was a preacher. So I'm like, bad eggs and all the bunch, right? But I'll never forget this woman. She had moved from Florida to Tennessee. In the last couple of years, she moved back to Florida. You've heard me probably share the story how she was atheist, how she was my mission to try and talk to her about Jesus. And right before she left, I bought her a big chest, with all kinds of candies that she liked. And in the bottom of it was a Bible with her name inscribed on it. It broke my heart when I saw that she'd moved and she'd left the chest and the candy on her porch. But when I opened the chest up, I found the candy, Brother Dave. The one thing that was missing was the Bible. And she took that Bible back to Florida with her. She had different taste. She loved art, what she called art, and she loved statues. And at this time, I'm probably 16, 17 years old, and she had a statue in the yard, and I'm going to be very discreet, but it was not appropriate. And I felt vexed every time I had to go in the backyard and mow her yard. So I'm on my Cub Cadet, and I've got my hat bill, and I'm turning. I mean, the neighbors up on the hill probably thought, man, this guy's a quack, you know. So I'm literally mowing around the statue, and I'm trying my best, like, oh, God, you know. And so I'm not looking. I'm purposing in my heart. I'm purposing I'm not going to look. It's just not right. I'll never forget, probably a year mowing season came and went, and I said, Lord, I'm going to have to do this all over again next year. You know, I was already letting the grass, I wouldn't weed it around. I was hoping that God would supernaturally grow the grass to be 10 foot tall, you know. And but I'll never forget, I looked out across the fence, and there's a bunch of cattle on the other side of that woven wire fence. And I said, Lord, I'm really tired. I'm trying to be clean. I'm trying to live right. I'm trying to do things that honor you. Can I say something? Pleasure and sin is not worth a clear or clean conscience with God. If you have a clear conscience with God, that is worth more. And you know what I'm talking about. Because when that conscience is dirty and it's robbed, it's terrible. You're like, oh God, I'll never get back to where I used to be with you. You want to live to where there's nothing in your mind, nothing on your mind between you and God. And I said, Lord, I'm tired of even having, the thought, that I'm going to have to mow around this. At that time, I'm making more than 60. I mean, this is another job, and I was making pretty good money, and I really didn't want to give it up. I said, Lord, you could let the cattle. One day I said, Lord, I'm tired of doing this. You know my heart. I said, you could honestly let the cattle come over here and knock this thing down. Wouldn't that be crazy? I'll never forget thinking, what a crazy idea that is. God, you could take care of this. I wouldn't have to even, because I can't. I thought through this. I'm like, well, do I just knock it over? Do I just accidentally back into it with my mower and let the whole thing come crumbling down like Dagon for the Philistines? I'm like, well, Lord, that's not right because I'm trying to live for you, but it's two wrongs don't make a right, so I don't know what to do. It's personal, private property. I can't destroy her property. Worst thing that happens, she's got a camera somewhere, and I have to buy that statue. Try to explain that to Mom and Dad. So I said, Lord, you can let cattle. And I laughed about it. And I honestly thought that I was going to just have to keep on mowing around the statue, and just have to keep on making up my mind. I'm not looking. You say that's crazy. To God, it wasn't. Because the next time I come over to mow, my customer, I'm sure she don't listen, but my customer was fuming hot. And she could get as angry as anybody I've ever met in my life, and quick. And she was fuming hot. I said, well, Miss So-and-so, what's wrong? She said that, and she used choice words again. She was very good about using choice words, very fluent in it. And she's like, that neighbor of mine, his cattle got out last night. And they've been in my yard all morning. And he just come and got them back. And she said, I don't know what I've got left. All my flowers are probably eaten. She's like, I probably lost all of my garden, all of these things. She said, I don't know what's left back there. I couldn't get on my mower and ride back there quick enough. If I'm lying, I'm dying. Not one flower was touched. Her flower beds were okay. The only thing that was destroyed, broke into multiple pieces, Miss Statue. So I'm like, Lord, you done that with the cattle? So I did. I took my foot and I rolled it across the yard into a back section by the fence. And then God didn't have to grow grass 10 feet high. God just grew it a couple of feet, and it went right over, and it hit it. She never knew what happened to it. Never had to worry about it no more. You know what's crazy, though? We laugh and we say, boy, that sounds, a little dramatic. Listen, you cannot take your walk with God too serious. Are you listening to me? The people that don't take their walk with God seriously enough, those are the ones going to fall. And listen, holiness and living for God, it's always legalism to those who don't want to live by it. I've been around legalism. I know what legalism is. But living for God and saying, God, I cannot live close enough to you, that is not the same thing. That's saying, God, you are my life. What I listen to, what I watch, what's on my TV, all of these things, it's either drawing me closer to you or it's not. And then we get upset and we say, well, I can't believe this one fell or that one fell. It happens the same way for everybody. No one falls overnight. No one dies overnight. Sin always has a trail. You find you find the devastation. You find someone who's fallen. You always find a history behind it. You don't just up and fall. That's why you've got to guard your walk with God. And that's when I hear news of people falling. It don't make me rise up in indignation and say, how dare them? It scares me to death. Because I say, oh God, at one time in their life, they had a walk with God. They had a relationship with you. They prayed. They loved you. They would weep when you'd mention the name of Jesus. Oh God, don't let me get to that point. You've got the purpose in your heart. You've got the purpose in your heart. You've got the purpose. And God cared enough about my purpose as just a teenage boy that God let me spell out, think out how it would be. And God did it. And all those years of mowing that yard, they never broke out except that one time after I'd prayed that prayer. And God let the cattle come through. Can you imagine that? I've never loved cattle so much in my life. Man, thank God for them. Listen, God loves when you make Him not just a priority in your life. You make Him your life. Miss Monica's come to the piano. We're wrapping up this morning. I'm done. I've said all I'm saying. Jesus has got to be more than a habit to you. He's got to be your life. He's got to be your life. Because you'll never make it if He's not. I'll never make it if He's not. I'll join the number of others. If my love for the Lord grows cold and stale, if I stop purposing in my heart, I've got the purpose now as much as I did when I was 14, 15, 16 to serve God. It hasn't got less. The battle doesn't get easier. Every day of your life, you take up your cross and you say, I'm going to follow Jesus. There are things I could have done as a teenager. Mom and Dad would have had no problem. It wouldn't have been grave sins. It wouldn't have sent me to hell. But there were boundaries that God put in my heart. Catherine, we laugh about all the time to this day. It's like, you were this, you were that. You know. My brother's not that. Yeah, they are. Everyone's got to find those boundaries. But there were boundaries God put in my heart as a kid. And listen to me, the sooner you start sowing, the sooner you start reaping. There are some things, if I'll stay faithful to God, I'm not going to have to wait until I'm gray-headed to start reaping. I can reap them now and the rest of my life if I'll stay faithful to God. And you can too, young people. If you'll start sowing to God in your teenage years, you'll be reaping in your 20s, 30s, and 40s and the rest of your life. And you'll reap not regrets. You'll reap joy. You'll reap happiness. You'll reap good nights of rest and peace with God and a relationship that when you have it, you would not trade for all the money, all the pleasure that this world has to offer you. Daniel had no regrets serving God. I promise you that. And I don't, you don't. If you serve God any length of time, your regrets never come from serving Jesus. Biggest regret is not serving Him sooner. Let's stand to our feet, heads about.